Hey, welcome to episode 3 of The Boost with our guest, Dr. Brett Talbot from Videra Health. Let's go. All right, welcome to episode 3 of The Boost, conversations with people promoting mental health. And I'm your host, Steve Turney. And I'm thrilled to be here with Dr. Brett Talbot, CCO and co-founder of Videra Health. Dr. Talbot, how are you?
Today is a great day, Steve, and it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Excellent. Nice. Where are you calling in from today?
Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay, good. I've skied at Snowbird out that way. That's my one experience.
It's been a good snow season.
Good. Do you get into the powder? Are you like snowboarder, skier?
Yeah, grew up skiing and then switched to snowboarding as a teenager in the 90s, like most, right? But then, now I have little kids, and we still get up into the hills and on the slopes.
Awesome. Good. Well, I'm thrilled to have you on the show. We're going to learn about Videra Health, what you're doing, sort of the why behind this company for you. But as we always do, we're going to start with two things, the virtual hug and the shameless plug. And part of promoting mental health is the beautiful work companies like you are doing. And we'll start with the virtual hug, which is tell us something or someone you're grateful for today.
Yeah, today especially, because we had a long winter and a lot of snow, we're starting to see spring. And so I'm grateful today for nature, the sunshine, and the renewal that kind of brings even to our mental health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Things move in seasons and waves. And so it's been beautiful out this way. I live just north of Nashville, and it's the same thing where you see the blooms, the dogwoods blooming, and it's just something about being able to shake off the winter and head towards something new. So I'm right there with you. So jump into the shameless plug. Talk about Videra Health, what you're doing. We're going to get into some of the accolades and industry honors you guys have been earning. But talk about what you're doing and especially what you're doing well there.
Yeah. Videra Health is an exciting what we're doing, exciting company in technology. I'm a clinician by background. I'm a clinical psychologist, received my PhD from the University of Houston and went into practice for a lot of years and really saw in practice as well as we see today that there's just a shortage of mental health practitioners. Mm-hmm. And the work, the demand isn't slowing down. And so really Videra was built on the premise that there's lots of demand, not enough capacity to meet the demand. We have to leverage technology in order to provide the services that patients need and deserve. And so today, Videra Health is an AI-powered video assessment platform built to scale those provider-patient interactions. And what makes us unique is that we leverage those video check-ins and that are done asynchronously, so not live. You don't have to schedule a visit. You can do it on your own time, and the provider can review it on his or her own time. And by leveraging that, then we can really get a sophisticated view of what's going on for patients. And that's what I saw in my own practice before starting Videra Health was so much is going on outside of the live visits. So much life is happening that influences outcomes, yet we don't have a lot of insight as practitioners, as the healthcare system into what's going on. And so we've really built a sophisticated way to get that sort of insight into what's going on with patients at a personal level, as a population level, to really drive better outcomes.
Okay, so there's two components of that jump out for me. There's the asynchronicity, and then there's the AI. So talk a little bit more about the asynchronous component of that. What is it about the asynchronous video? And I've seen this in other tools, maybe more consumer-focused tools. There's some parallels, but what is it about that facilitates the insights into the behaviors?
Yeah, so the asynchronous piece itself is oftentimes we are just lacking the data, the info from the patients. And the reason we don't have it is because as a healthcare system, we've made it really inconvenient for those patients to give us the information we need to provide care.
Mm-hmm.
So traditionally, we require them to set an appointment, come to our office, take time off of work, find daycare, drive down, sit in a, it's very inconvenient.
Yeah.
And then we got, more, well, we'll send you an email or send you a text, but still like lots of barriers to providing that type of information that we need.
Yeah.
So the asynchronous part of it is really convenient. And we've built upon that asynchronous where, things like usernames, passwords, app downloads, you don't have to do any of that in order to provide meaningful information back to your provider. And then that really what asynchronous does is solve the scale problem. In traditional synchronous interactions, even with the advent of telehealth and the surge of telehealth during the pandemic,
Sure.
It was made convenient for a patient where they didn't have to drive somewhere. So it changed where the location happened. But it really didn't change the time required by either party or the scheduling that you had to sync up. So asynchronous really allows the scalability where a provider can get insight into patients, tens of thousands of patients without really having to dedicate any significant amount of time face-to-face with that patient.
Okay. So there's this fractional nature of things that's happening. It seems like a lot of things are breaking apart, and breaking sounds like a bad thing, but there's also an opportunity within there. So that makes a ton of sense where instead of having to have both people in the same place at the same time, or both people at the same time, where you are breaking the time and space, not continuum, but you're breaking the time and space requirement. If you are, let me know, because I definitely want to try it out. But you're breaking those rules that we formerly had to abide by because the system and our technology limitations.
Absolutely, and we're not trying to, replace all face-to-face interactions. There's still need and desire for face-to-face interactions. However, we've taken what should be a more continuous interaction and shoved it into episodic encounters. Okay. And really, there's so much about healthcare that can be asynchronous, and still a portion of healthcare and service delivery and treatment delivery needs to be synchronous or live. But a lot of that other stuff can be automated and augmented in an asynchronous fashion and really offload some of that burden from our most limited resources, the credentialed physicians and providers and staff that need more time to spend on what they do best, which is that face-to-face interaction, and less time on those parallel and peripheral things that can be automated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe that leads us into the AI portion of things, which is being adopted tremendously in different number of ways. And then there's also reticence, of course. And I think it was, there's a couple different models, but explain it to me like a 5 or 6 year old, the AI component of this, which I'm fascinated by as we started this podcast. And we record here in Riverside and then move it over to Descript. And Descript is a service, software as a service, AI driven, that in a matter of minutes gives us a full transcription via AI of conversations, and it identifies people's voices. And talk about a lovely service that just solves for so much typing. And when it comes down to it, the clinician and the provider, if we're talking about maybe EHR platforms, for example, the amount of time we've spent typing as professionals, even as non-clinicians, is astounding compared to how fast you and I are talking. Just the speed per words is dramatically faster. And now to have technology catch up and do a pretty great job with the service that I've used, I'm actually floored. I'm actually impressed. So talk down to me like a 6-year-old and kind of explain the AI component for anybody in the audience who might be a little bit leery of the tech. And then it's also just typically a simple, beautiful way to describe what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple ways to think about it, and if we kind of dovetail off of that asynchronous and scalability of healthcare interactions, you really immediately see the need for AI to help us out there, because we've said, hey, instead of meeting face to face, one on one, we're saying now you can have interactions with your patients, hundreds and thousands, asynchronously.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you have this massive data set and massive amount of data and information about your patients that you, again, providers don't have a lot of time to go through. So leveraging technology to automate that piece is really where Videra specifically leverages AI to do that. And we do that in a few different ways. And like you mentioned, Steve, like on the transcript, there's lots of other AI applications in healthcare right now, especially around EHR documentation, around transcriptions. We do a little bit of transcribing of the asynchronous video interactions, but we're really not in the documentation space, in the EHR system of record space. We really are leveraging technology to learn more about the patient, to analyze that and make it actionable for the provider. So there's a couple layers that we do that by. So if you think of, we take an asynchronous interaction, a patient will get a text invite from our system saying, hey, your provider would like you to check in, just see how things are going. They're going to be guided through a structured or semi-structured sort of interview. But again, the provider's not live on the other side. And they're going to record their answers and their responses and submit them. Mm-hmm. Now, if they were live, the provider has been trained through medical school and grad school and through experience to look for and listen for certain things during those interactions. So what we've done at Videra is take all of that knowledge and teach algorithms and machine learning models to look and listen for those same things as if you were going to be in the room with the patient. Yeah. So it's natural language processing, what they're saying, voice analysis, how they're saying it, facial and emotional analysis, what's going on in their affect and visually, and also movement, what's going on, twitches, jitters, eye movements, things of that sort. So we are picking up on rate of speech, sentiment, affect, movement analysis. And so it can really learn what Steve normally looks like, talks like, and sounds like, and then we can also ask it to look for certain things that your provider is specializing in mental health, for example. We're talking about look for depressive affect, anxious speech, suicidal language, things of that sort. But beyond mental health as well, other things. And then we tell the AI to look for that. So 1,000 people have taken an asynchronous check-in. The AI goes through and listens and looks for all of those things, transcribes everything that's said in the video, and then triggers alerts or highlights what's going on for each patient, and then surfaces those who are meeting certain thresholds or struggling in certain areas.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Even on the biohealth side of things, I go when I go to a doctor, you can just watch them working down the workflow and the work tree. And I think it's amazing how many hours you've spent just memorizing that and getting familiar with it, and to offload that to smart technology I think that component makes a lot of sense. Not to say that we throw the baby out with the bathwater, or that, like you said earlier, we're not going to need human interaction. But certainly those structural, data driven processes are best for, certain types of technology. And I don't know if the human brain is at some point the best tool for that compared to maybe some other things. But
absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just to add to that, there's the piece where there's still clinical judgment needed, right? So the FDA is increasingly starting to regulate the AI space. It's still kind of Wild West a little bit. So really, it's like a sophisticated data gathering with some analysis, but there's still a provider there to make clinical judgments. But to your point, we kind of know the 5 questions or the 10 questions we want to ask each patient that we're treating for certain disease states or certain mental health issues.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily, take a face-to-face interaction to do that. And in fact, by automating it, we're actually more consistent. When you're doing it human-driven, there's lots of variation and lots of inconsistency about how those interviews or how those interactions are done. So you take case managers, care navigators, nurse managers, and there's lots of idiosyncrasies in that, and we can actually make them very consistent. And then computers also are very good compared to humans at remembering the previous interactions. As providers, it's really hard to remember what Steve was like 6 months ago, right? Because we just I've met with you and now I kind of just see how you are now. But a computer is really good comparing your current state with a previous state. And if we can start to learn those patterns, we can actually start to learn and predict what your future state may be.
That's great. I mean, I have a hard time thinking about me 6 months ago, trying to remember some 1 hour conversation I had.
Absolutely.
Like, good luck. So that makes a lot of sense. So that leads us into a couple things. One is this topic of value-based care and outcomes. And if you're not familiar with value-based care, it's essentially sort of, I'd say, I don't know, maybe the last 10 years or so, especially a focus on getting toward greater quality and better outcomes with the care that we're providing, and how to incentivize for that through the system is kind of a rudimentary way that I understand it. And we're still driving toward outcomes on the biohealth side. And also that's a rich conversation on the behavioral health and mental health side as well. So I want to talk about something you talked about with outcomes. And then I think that leads us nicely into a conversation about data, which you were talking about earlier, and sort of what are some of those gold mines that we've been tapping into that we haven't had access to before, and then where those gaps still exist. So to kind of start at the beginning, you said this recently about the transition to value-based care. You said, how do we get better outcomes? Good outcomes come from good treatment, valuable treatment, and valuable treatment only comes from data-driven clinical decisions. We can use technology to enable greater insight into the patient's journey now that we have more data across the whole experience to see what's working, when it's working, for whom it is working, and then really get at value. So talk a little bit more about that. Where in your mind are we, especially on the mental and behavioral health side, but maybe healthcare generally? Where do you see the value ecosystem and outcomes and the data-driven clinical decision-making process? Where are we at?
Yeah, we are trending in the right direction, but slowly.
Yeah.
And mental health and behavioral health is behind the curve. We're starting to see more, not just the value-based, but you're starting to hear other terms and performance-based care and measurement-based care and outcomes-driven treatment and things of this sort. And so we're trending in that right direction. Yet the major gap is still that we're gathering that information or those measurements still during live encounters, which inherently makes them episodic. So we're actually only really taking small snapshots of the patient journey and then making very significant clinical decisions about what could work or should work for a patient. And then we have this huge gap before we get more data at another encounter. And if something wasn't working, we've lost quite a bit of time, like still quite a bit of trial and error, especially in mental health and behavioral health, as well as across the industry, where we're losing, weeks and months and years of quality life because we don't have the information that we need at the time we need it. And we're still shoving it into these episodic encounters. We are starting to see more trend towards continuous monitoring. So you start to see more remote patient monitoring. Now CMS has come out with remote therapeutic monitoring codes, which is kind of the tip of the spear for technologists and providers to start to say, hey, we need more information, and there's vehicles and methods to do that. And you see that in chronic illness. Let's say you have oximeters, glucometers for certain things that we're pulling down continuous metrics so we know what's going on with patients. But we haven't seen that trend fully get traction in other areas, primarily because there's not devices or peripheral devices to track continuously like there are for chronic illnesses. Whereas Videra Health, we believe that video capture is actually that device, is that method of, well, how can we get some of that information over time for things that you can't track from a heart rate monitor? Well, the human on video actually is a really good indicator of what's going on for them. Now we just need a method to capture that more continuously outside of live encounters. So I think we're headed in the right direction slowly. Mental health, behavioral health is behind, but we're starting to see technologies like Videra Health, like AI, like asynchronous interactions, and AI-powered analysis to really get at some of that more continuous data. And so back to that quote that you mentioned earlier, that's really where value comes from, is that bottom line, we just need more information about how the patients are doing so we can make more informed decisions. Better informed decisions should lead to better treatment, and better treatment should lead to better outcomes. But so often we do a treatment based on previous data or a snapshot of data, and then we do an intervention, and then we say good luck, and let us know if it's not working. And we kind of leave, especially in mental health and behavioral health, we leave people kind of on their own, and really put the burden on them to tell us if something's going wrong or not. And we lose a lot of time, money, resources, and life continuing to do it that way.
Yeah. I mean, not to get too sort of philosophical, but it's like the whole world's a stage. We're these actors on it, and it's like we walk into, maybe some talk therapy or perhaps a doctor's visit, and it's like there's no backdrop, there's no context. And I know we're getting better, and I would get out of my depth pretty quickly saying what CMS is or isn't requiring. But I know, like, what in terms of social determinants of health or food deserts in your neighborhood, or certain behavioral signals in your home or with your family, it's a very complicated set of data to figure out how do we fairly and ethically request a standardized set of data that provides that context and that backdrop for real health. I mean, and a lot of it is how you're sleeping. Some of that can be monitored. How you're eating. What's your loneliness factor or quotient? Those types of things. What's your work-life environment that we just haven't been able to access before? So Videra Health, you're saying that video component is one of those ways to cross that threshold, get across that screen of, simply the patient-doctor encounter, and have quite a bit more rich context for what's actually going on.
Right. You're exactly right. There's so much going on. The research suggests that 80% of what predicts positive long-term outcomes is predicted by the things happening outside of the live encounters.
Yeah.
Yet we don't have a lot of insight into what's going on there. And so we create surveys, we create questionnaires, and we send them out. Very poor engagement rates, very poor interaction, and very limited information, because we have to know what to ask. And then we ask it. And what we've found at Videra Health is that patients really don't like to be interrogated about how they're doing, and maybe be guided, but they really want to just talk about what's happening. And we found that once you give them that opportunity for them to tell you what's going on, they will. we just don't have the time in live encounters to do that because we're pushing patients through. We got to see all of our patients in the day and keeping the clinic on schedule, things of that sort. But when you really just give them an open-ended opportunity to say what's stressing them out, how's work going, my dog is sick, I just separated from my partner, I'm scared, I'm lonely. These things start to predict disease state and to predict pattern and etiology, and we can use that in order to better provide the services that they need, the access to it, so we get a real view of what's going on at a personal level as well as a population level, to make better clinical decisions.
So that's interesting, because then it becomes how to solve for the right sort of acuity for the care, and then the right sort of access for the technology. Because this, correct me if I'm wrong, this could really help standardize across state lines, for example. This could be a national standardization effort where we have a more complete data set based on regardless of where you are in the country, and specifically to where you are in the country. And I think that's net positive. I worked for a company that had an amazing solution to a horrible problem, which was that each state had a database of clinicians or doctors or NPs who were excluded in that one state of providing because of things they've done. And that list for a while was maybe in a spreadsheet and maybe in somebody's desk drawer. And simply by aggregating all 50 plus of those lists of exclusions, then we compiled this national data set. So that's where it goes in my mind, is like, is this something that we can hyper standardize across, regardless of where you live? Because that gets into the access solution for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the standardization, humans are not standard.
Yeah, for real.
So if we really want to do patient-centered care, patient-centered outcomes, we have to find a way to quote unquote standardize how we gain insight into what's driving health outcomes. Now, research is really helpful in identifying social determinants of health, access, what's working, what's not working. But to put that into real time, to put that into the individual's home, into the individual's own emotional experience, there's still a huge gap, right? We have all this research that, yes, food insecurity will lead to okay, we know that. Who in my community has food insecurity? We don't know.
Nope. Yeah.
The only way to go out there is a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources, and a lot of bias. So when we finally if we have a platform that's easy, natural, technology driven for the population as a whole to give us a peek into what's going on in their life, then we can all of a sudden start to actually find out who needs what and when and how to intervene, and to put into practice in real actionable ways all this research that we know would be helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we used to also say at that company, if you've seen one hospital, you've seen one hospital. There's a lot of room to grow in terms of standardizing the system, and the human is, if at some point uniquely individual, then you still have at least a bedrock of standardization.
And to kind of go off with that a little bit more is we do have a lot of standardization in healthcare. In fact, we've standardized it, almost overly standardized it, right? Sure. We have a survey or a questionnaire or a screening tool for every subpart and part of depression, anxiety, trauma, all these different things. But we can't necessarily put a patient through a 100 question or 200 question multiple choice survey every couple of weeks to find out what's going on with them. There's just no real way, meaningful way to do that. So at Videra Health, we've borrowed a little bit of what we've seen kind of lab work. You go in, you want to do a panel, draw a vial of blood, and they'll run 20 tests on that one vial. You had to just interact once, but 20 tests come from it, or 20 results.
Mm-hmm.
Video analytics can work the same way. We take one video recording, 30 seconds, even 60 seconds, of a patient talking about how their week was or what they're struggling with. And we can run that video, 60 seconds of video clip, through 60 or 20 or different algorithms. One algorithm is assessing for depression. One algorithm is assessing for anxiety. One algorithm is assessing for trauma. So all these different things running off of a kind of a single test, a single assessment, a single encounter. And so while we've traditionally tried to standardize it by making very, very structured surveys,
Mm-hmm.
we can also, in a similar way, standardize a data capture methodology, but we can run that data through a wide variety of different algorithms that are not necessarily standard to every single patient has to get these 20 and these only 20 lab tests. It's like, well, no, Steve's being seen for all these other things. Well, let's just flip those algorithms on, run the video through all of those, and can be individualized, but the data capture is standardized.
That's great. That feels good. It's like Procrusty's bed, where the guy comes and visits and gets a bed, and he's too short, so they stretch him out to fit the bed, or he's too tall, so they cut his ankles off. And it's like, no, it needs a better bed is what we need, a better system and structure. We don't need to, we don't need to stretch the person through 200 questions necessarily. When you can flip that on its head, and the tests can become multiples, running in parallel.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to get to this because this is fascinating. On World Mental Health Day recently, you encouraged people to take a moment to see, in quotes, those around you who might be struggling. And we often use that term, seeing a therapist, perhaps. And since you have that private group practice experience in behavioral health, clinical and programmatic consultation, I wanted to ask you about this, because what does it mean to you to be seen, and how can maybe somebody be more aware of that in their own lives, like seeing themselves or seeing somebody else? Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. It's something that I'm passionate about, that we're passionate about. In fact, Videra stems from the Latin word to see. Mm-hmm. And our slogan here at Videra is see people differently. And I think at an individual level, as consumers, as humans, we are seeing how technology can cater to my preferences, my convenience, my desires, my likes, my dislikes. How can it help me? Yet in healthcare, we haven't quite done that. We've still stuck with the same way we see people is, I will see you in a scheduled encounter in my office. Mm-hmm. And now we're saying, okay, well, I'll see you still scheduled on telehealth. And we really want to flip the whole, how do we see people on its head? And that really gets at that asynchronous. Now you can see people asynchronously, but also see more of them, more about them, get to know them better. What makes that patient a person? What drives them? What motivates them? Their emotions, their movements, their sentiments from a day-to-day basis, a week-to-week basis. Like there's right now in healthcare, not a lot of capacity to see that. So we want to help people see, we want to help providers see patients differently, in a different way, in a different method, turning the traditional encounter on its head, but also see more about the patient, more of the patient, understand them at a greater degree, and leverage technology to help you do that, to make better decisions. And that's kind of what we mean by encouraging people to see others. And we can do that in a very communal, very one-on-one way as well. It's just every one of us is a patient, especially in mental health, behavioral health. Everyone is going through something. And so taking a moment to really see, not just interact or have an encounter with somebody, but really try to see what's going on for them, what's driving them. And that way, even in our own communities outside of healthcare delivery, we can continue to address and create supportive communities around mental health and behavioral health. And I saw that in my private practice, which we can speak a little bit more about, but that's kind of what we mean by seeing people differently.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. You know, in the artist world, oftentimes the best art or art teachers say simply, look more closely. You know, are you seeing what's there? Not drawing the lines, but actually seeing the light. So in some kind of parallel, you're helping see a lot more and a lot deeper too. There's a depth and dimension to what you're able to offer.
I really like that. I really like that analogy, because even in healthcare, we kind of go by vital signs, right? You come in and there's just a certain amount of metrics I have the time to gather, and I'm basing my decisions off of that. And that's really not the full picture, right? There's so much more going on. And we talk about holistic care and things of that sort, but the reality of delivering that is very limited. There's just not the scalable a scalable way to do that. So leveraging technology is definitely the way to get into that greater insight. And you had asked the question about the private practice, and I think that's what I found. I was working full time in healthcare as a licensed psychologist. In administration, actually was doing much more around the delivery and the ecosystem, and started like standing up EHRs, integrating telehealth before telehealth was cool, and just doing a lot of that. And was actually teaching at the university at the time, some behavioral health courses. And one of my students introduced me to some technologists. And I had been consulting with some technology companies here in Utah. There's big tech boom. So lots of new technology companies wanting to get more into healthcare. So I was in my private practice doing a lot of consultation for technology companies, as well as continuing to do psychological evaluations, diagnostics, tracking patients over time. And all of it at the time lent itself to, oh man, like we are not utilizing technology as we should. There's huge gaps in care. We don't have insight. We don't know what happens once the patient leaves the office. And it was about that time that the student introduced me to some technologists who who had previously built the world's largest video job interviewing platform, asynchronous, AI-driven, and looking to leverage into healthcare. And that's what eventually became, after a couple of years of beta testing and consultation, what eventually became my co-founders and business partners and Videra Health.
Nice. Okay, I didn't know that it came from a little bit of the outside of the industry. That's interesting. That's fascinating, actually. Well, I know you guys have won the People's Choice Award for Best Patient Experience Technology at ATA 2023, and you're certainly doing amazing things. And this has been really helpful and valuable for me. I hope it is for everybody listening out there to learn more about, one, what Videra is doing, but two, what's happening in the space that Videra is a part of, this big macro tsunami wave that we're riding. And so congrats to you and your company. I wish you the best. Thanks for helping me learn a little bit today, actually quite a bit. So just to wrap up, any contact info you want to share, or any last thoughts?
Yeah, anyone interested in how to leverage asynchronous interactions, automated video assessments, AI into practice, viderahealth.com. You can email me at brett@viderahealth.com as well. We're doing a lot of work across the space, across levels of care, across conditions, from all the befores, the in-betweens, and the afters. Anytime you want to get information from your patient and you don't have the time or the team or the capacity to get that information, that's where we can leverage technology to help you get greater insight into your patients' journeys and empower you and augment your clinical expertise to improve care. So we are passionate about moving the needle here, especially in behavioral health and mental health. Suicidality is continues to be an issue. Pandemic has increased depression and anxiety. Lots of work to do. Lots of good people out there doing the work. Not enough of us. Reach out. We'd love to help you scale your healthcare interactions.
Awesome. Well, we'll share this out on LinkedIn. It's probably our biggest channel, big healthcare community, B2B community, and big behavioral health community. So hopefully some folks get in contact with you. But Dr. Talbot, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Steve, you as well. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.